Hey y'all, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to KP. Annalise here. So Abba was leading me to share because um I'm watching one of my favorite movies, and I want to say literally it's like, okay, one of my favorite Christmas movies of all time, even though it's new. Even though it's new, I would say new-ish. Because it's new-ish, it's called Klaus off of Netflix, and of course you can only see it on Netflix because it's a Netflix film, as Netflix has been putting out its own films. With that being said, Klaus is basically one of the Christmas movies or whatever, and it basically is kind of just going on the perspective of like, okay, how this all got started. And when you hear the story of Christmas, though it's supposed to be about Jesus, where Jesus wasn't really born on Christmas, but what is showing is that there was this man named Saint Nick who was a toy maker and that built toys for kids and would go around with sacks of toys around the village to give kids toys. There's other variations of it, there's other scary variations of it, all of these different things, but understanding that Christmas is not a high holy day or a it's not a high holy day. It's considered a pagan holiday. That's nor here nor there because we're not here to get into that. It's about how basically Christmas got started. But when you see the way that it goes about, as far as in this town called Smearensburg, you get to see these clans. And one of the things, or one of the themes in the movie, is one act of kindness always sparks another. And so, and then it has my favorite song in there, uh Invisible, that's what it's called. um the greatest things in life are invisible. And that even holds weight there because have to understand, like, the greatest things in life are truly invisible. Love, because you can't necessarily see God with your eyeballs, like his physical body. You didn't see Jesus with your physical eyeballs. You don't see Holy Spirit with your physical eyeballs. Like, that doesn't negate that they're there. That doesn't negate that Jesus was here on the earth, and he conquered death, hell, and the grave before he sat on his rightful space on the right hand of God. Um, thank you, Holy Spirit. You can see the space of the way material things that we try to make everything about, whether that be jobs, titles, income, money, even bills, and try to make those things just so important. They're really not. If you cannot take it with you, like, it don't matter. But with that being said, you can see how Jesper is the main character in it, where he has this kind of laid back life when you see it from the beginning. And in this laid back life of his, of course, he loves his I believe he says it's like caviar and silk silk sheets. And so that's what he's about. Like, it's those heiresses, or those heirs that are like basically given everything, and they're just like, I don't gotta do nothing, because he was supposed to be training to be a postman, but he basically botched every assignment. And his dad was like, I'm not going to let you walk into a life that's void of any meaning or purpose. And that's kind of the same thing when it comes down to Abba. Jesper was comfortable with his silk sheets and his caviar and his cappuccinos and whatnot. He was comfortable. I was not going to let you sit in a life that's void of any meaning or purpose. Like, no. And so he's like, congratulations, you're a postman. He's like, what? Hold on. What's going on? And then he's being sarcastic the whole way there. You're talking about some, thank you, dad. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Because he has a treacherous road to get where he's supposed to go. Understanding that in a spiritual sense, that we have a road in the space of where we are supposed to go. Even though you get on the potter's wheel and you are going through your process, that doesn't stop the assignment once you get to the place that you're supposed to get. You're a totally spy. You're going to continue to have assignments. You're going to continue to have spaces and places where you have to infiltrate. You got to shut down this. You got to go figure out this, get information on that. When you watch Totally Spies, some of their missions were easy. They just had to get information. Others of them were a little bit more what you call, where they had to defeat an enemy, but sometimes it kind of dragged on and it was kind of long. Um, and you can see that throughout, like, just watching the show. But with Klaus, you can see how that journey for him to get where he was supposed to go in order to do his assignment was a little bit much in the way that he had to get there. But once he got there, it was like, okay, you have a mission, and his mission was to get 6,000 letters in order for him to get back to those silk sheets. But you can see how, because he was there and there was no like going back to that comfort or anything, that being cut off, he had to figure it out. And so he had to think and he had to be innovative. But the ideas that he's coming up with, Holy Spirit's highlighting that as those are the whispers of Holy Spirit that's dropping those things in your spirit. As it says, he seals instructions within you, and he whispers instructions or directions while you are sleeping. He guards you while you are sleeping. Those are all scriptures, paraphrasing. But as he's basically adjusting to the harshness of Smearensburg, being that it's this very cold place, and even cold when it comes down to the the clans that are there, because you have the Ellingbows and the Crumbs, and they have basically been at war with each other for thousands and thousands of years. And so you see these little kids, and this is where that, how they say that thug life comes in, the hate you give little infants f's everybody. With that being said, you can see that the hatred that they carried through thousand generations, you can see how that just carried on, and that built that hate, built into the next generation and built into the next generation, to the point that it's a known thing. And it's like how she said it, you didn't mean to disrespect all of that heritage and tradition, did you? Because the two kids, there was this present that was given to one of the kids, and it was like this little frog that was hopping around. And so because one of them was a crumb and one of them was an Ellingbow, they weren't supposed to play with each other. But seeing this frog, them being kids, they're just like laughing, and they start to jump around, and they start to chase each other with this frog and whatnot. But then you can see where the tradition, they were basically like, you didn't mean to disrespect all of that tradition and whatnot. And Abba was highlighting that to me as a space of how we can really get stuck in our ways, and we can really get stuck in a space of all of that hatred. That's a lot of hatred when you look at what they were doing to each other. And they made it like a light thing about it, and they kind of made it a little funny. But at the same time, it's like they're throwing spears at each other, they're dropping pots on each other's heads, they are throwing fish guts on each other's laundry and stuff. Like, they are doing some foul stuff to each other. And then there's this thing called a the the bell or whatever. And when you ring this bell, they all come out with axes, spears, and stuff, and they are fighting. They are fighting each other. And so I was highlighting that as a space of the evil and the generational curses that go on throughout the clans and throughout the space of like just hating this person and hating that person. Thank you, Holy Spirit. Wow. Because I was just watching Avatar: The Last Airbender as well, and they were at the part where they were trying to go through a certain area, and there was the two clans that basically despise each other. One was like this very kind of barbaric butch kind of clan, but the other clan was very kind of like Hasidity and class and clean and whatnot. It's almost like when you're looking at the Lord of the Rings, it's like the dwarves versus the elves. Almost like that's how it looked in the Avatar or whatever. But you could see that there was a space of them hating each other, but they didn't even understand why they hated each other. And one had a story, the other had a story, but the stories didn't match. And then because Aang was there 100 years ago, he knew what happened. So he's like, no, your story's wrong and your story's wrong. So y'all over here hating each other for no reason. And so here you see that in the space of the Ellingbows and the Crumbs, like they don't. there's no real reason why they are at each other's throats. They just are. And then you see how the children come together, where now you have Jesper that's trying to get letters, and he uses this kid to say, hey, if you give me a penny, I'll go ahead and send this letter out. And so because of that, that sparks the kids to know, oh dang, my cousin said if you write a letter to Klaus, he'll give you a toy. And you just got to send the letter. It doesn't have it's not a letter unless it has postage. Don't forget your penny. And so he's basically training all the kids to write a letter and to put the postage on and to give the penny and whatnot. So he's making his letters or whatever, but the letters are of course supposed to be for them to get a toy. But then they hear, because of this naughty kid, Jesper makes up this story about basically Klaus being able to see him even when he's not aware of it. And so all the kids are like, wait, what? You got to be good to get toys. And so they begin to be nice to each other and clean up stuff. But you see the space of the way that they're doing it at first. They're explaining it. They're like, one of them is explaining, hey, we, instead of like taking all her berries, we collected them all for her and left them at her doorstep. And then she came back and gave our mom some jam. And then my mom took the jam and made a cake and gave her the cake. But you could see every time they went back and forth, they would just give it to each other with an attitude, talking about some like you can't do better than me. I'm gonna outdo you in the niceness. And so that kindness, that one act of kindness, sparked another, where it just became this avalanche or this ripple effect. And Abba was just highlighting that, is to show like, okay, um how them being very evil to one another, like to the point where like one of the parts where they basically had this guy in the tub, and the house fell, and then he fell out of the tub as he was taking a bath. And mind you, it's like, it's cold, cold, cold. Then you have like they be throwing spears at each other. They be sitting here like, when I say they be going at it, they be going at it. Now of course they made light of it being that it's a children's movie, but this is how it can be when you're looking at people. And this can especially be with people that are relatives, or people that are family, or people that are close friends. You can see it just being at their throats, at each other's throats. And with that being said, uh Abba was just highlighting that can be something that's seen as the norm just because they do it. Just because you do it does not make it normal. Just because the world does it, just because society does it, does not make it normal, does not make it okay, does not make it kingdom, as far as in the right thing you're supposed to do. And in that space, you see the kids, they start to do these kind of things. They're like, hey, I cleaned up my dad's clarinet. He seemed happy. Can I get a toy, please? Then how he's like telling them, oh, we want a toy, we want a toy. He's like, you got to write a letter. And they're just like, well, we don't know how to like write. And he's just like, well, you got to learn how to write. So why don't you go to school to learn how to write? He's saying it sarcastically, but he doesn't understand how him trying to get back to his silk sheets is literally transforming this whole town, and how they are now playing with each other and walking with each other and whatnot. And you can see how the ones that are very stubborn, that are like, hold on, we got to do something to stop this. So this, like, they were like, we're gonna come together in this peace to stop all this peace. And you can see how people can get very disrupted when it comes down to doing things that aren't normal to them. They are used to that Crumb and Ellingbo hatred and that going back and forth and whatnot. He said, the way that she said it, she's like, we got to stop all of this. Our clans demand it, or our ancestors demand it, in the space of them basically going back to them being at each other's throats, opposed to being in this space of like laughing with one another and having this peace. And you could see the kids, they begin to clean up everything, going down the houses and cleaning up the spears and cleaning up the yards and shoveling the yards and painting the fences. And they built a playground for the kids, and they started letting them go to school, and like they started to learn how to write their name and all of these things. You can see the way that the glow up of this whole town, just because Jesper's there to get his letters. But Abba was highlighting that to show that how they are really gung ho about, hold on, we got to stop this in order to basically get back to hating each other. And this is what the enemy does in the space of him coming after you to stop the growth, to stop you from trusting God, to stop you from believing what God has been telling you, to make you question what God has been telling you, so that you can go back into that space of going into that old man, of going back into those old habits and patterns, to basically continue those generational curses, so you're not stepping into those generational blessings, so you're not going through that training and that process and that crushing and pruning and potter's wheel and refining fire, to be able to carry that mantle that you were called to carry. So this is what Abba was highlighting to me throughout this movie, where it's like, dang, I watched this movie I don't know how many times, and I want to say at least 100. I didn't watch this movie so many times, but you can just see also Jesper in and of himself, he began to grow, he began to pivot and flow and be more innovative and think of more things, because they had to figure out how to deliver the toys, they had to figure out how to get them to the children without them seeing, they had to adapt to what they were hearing, as far as in like, okay, the kids hearing that there was a reindeer or a flying sleigh by reindeer, when it was really them being chased by the two clans or whatever, trying to stop them. You know, the space of, hey, if you put a sock on your what you call it, he'll fill it with toys, where it was, he wasn't trying to fill the sock with toys, it was just when he came into that particular house, it was a lot of dogs, and he was just like, okay, I'm not gonna creep in there, so he filled the sock with the toys that was on the mantle that were I guess drying. um and it's just a lot of little stuff like that that began to create like these kind of backstories to what um why we have certain things for Christmas, as far as in the him coming down the chimney, and that was really him being shot in the sky by Klaus. He basically stepped on a board and shot him in the sky, and then he fell down the chimney and left the toy. So you can see that it's very very much so clever way that they play on it, but you get to see how he grows. You get to see how um he adapts, and how he's like, hey, I'm actually doing something now, where it's almost like he begins to walk on his own, or it's like, thank you, Holy Spirit, you are now riding your bike without training wheels. You're now you're doing it by yourself. When you able to get in the kitchen, you could finally make a whole meal. You know what I'm saying? When you can get your laundry done, and you actually did your laundry. This is like, that be exciting stuff when you don't know how to do that basic stuff. And here he is in a space where he's trying to kind of quote unquote build a business, because he's a postman, and he's basically building this whole thing that he didn't even know he was building. And it was to the point that the teacher, the girl that he loved or whatever, was had to show him exactly what he did, and why it was so important. She was just like, you don't understand exactly what you have done, have you? You don't really get it, do you? And she had to show him all of the things that he was doing, how things just began to get cleaned up. Things were just better. Things were just nicer and cleaner. The atmosphere, the energy, all of it, even the kids getting toys, they were more playful, they were more what you call it. And that right there breaks that tradition, those generational curses, and now you're bringing in those generational blessings, as the kids from the Ellenbows and the Crumbs, they're now coming together. And you can see even later, oh, thank you, Holy Spirit, he's reminding me, later in the movie, there's the part where one of the clan, I guess the clan leader for the Ellenbro and the Crumb, um, the Crumb has this boy, and then the Ellingbo has this daughter, and the daughter's always saying mine. And so something happened where the Crumb boy saved the Ellingbo daughter, and because of that, it was just like, that one act of kindness sparked another. And so she basically picked him up and she said mine. And you could see at the end where they got married and stuff. So you could see how it's those breaking of those generational curses to bring in those generational blessings. And you can see, of course, at first where the clan leaders, they were just very like, like, nah, we do, this is what we do. There's not necessarily a reason behind it. It's just how they explained it. for as long as we can go back. An Ellingbow despises a crumb, and a crumb despises an Ellingbow. You can just see there was no reason behind it. This is where it was the we were talking about with EQ, for you to kind of begin to walk back into the things that you have, as far as in the things that you do. Thank you, Holy Spirit. Sorry about that. The things that you do, and question why you do the things that you do. Why do you do this? Why do you do that? And we were talking about the space of that pan or that ham, where she would cut off the sides of the ham, and the daughter asked the mom, and she said, I don't know, my mom did it. Then they asked the grandma, and the grandma says, oh, back then we didn't have a big enough pan, so we had to cut the sides off. But now, okay, wait a minute, we have a big enough pan, so we don't have to cut the sides off. You get me? It's that space of just certain things being a tradition, where we don't understand that we don't have to keep that going. Some things are just for the time being, for that era, or for what was going on there. Just like we were talking about the Nanny McPhee, there was the great aunt that was coming to take one of the children to educate them or whatever. Um, and you can see that kind of stemmed from a tradition of where, in that time when there was a lot of war going on, they would send the kids to the countryside to relatives that were in the countryside, and basically be trained up there until the war ceased and whatnot. That's kind of where that came from. But then you see how sometimes that would be something that still, what you called, with tradition, to kind of come and take a kid and have them be built up in a certain way, etc., etc. But you see, it's that space of this kind of tradition. And you can build new traditions, you can build new things that you do, and it doesn't always have to be that, where it's like, okay, it has to be this because we've always done it this way. Calm down. It can be something new, it could be something better. Sometimes times change, sometimes your families change, and they alter, so you're able to create new traditions and new things that actually adhere to everybody, and that help everybody, and that minister to everybody. It doesn't have to be this thing that, you know um it has to go on because that's the way we've always done it. Just like the Ellenbows and the Crumbs, they despise each other, so that has to keep going on just because. Like, no, they want to play with each other. These two want to get married. Y'all gonna stop that to still continue this space of being just despising each other, and being in this space of generational curses. Like, no, relax. But that's what Abba was giving me to share, because it was just like the way he was. I'm sitting here watching it, and he was just ministering to me, and I'm like, as many times as I've watched this, wow. And you could see just the way how Jesper changed, and how he was able to, like, just be better. And even when it came down to the opportunity for him to go back to get to his silk sheets, the boatman, he said, that's odd, I've never seen a postman more upset about leaving than when they came, because this was a place that was kind of like impossible for a lot of postmen to, what you call it, it'd be like within the week they would be gone or like leaving or whatever. This is like an impossible place. But that's also prophetic. Thank you, Holy Spirit, because it wasn't for them to change or alter that place. It was only for Jesper. You're called for a certain space. When you're called for a certain space, nobody can take your place. None of the other postmen could take Jesper's place. It was for Jesper to be able to go there and infiltrate there and build what he built there, in the space of creating that generational blessing and those generational peace and whatnot that was going on between the clans and whatnot. But you could see how he was upset about it. But in that upset, he just understood what he built. And he understood that those silk sheets, though he would miss them, silk sheets, that comfort, it was a space of that comfort is not more important than making an impact with the kids' toys. And it's really, really about the kids and the impact that he's had on the entire clan and the entire city of Smearensburg. But yes, that's what Abba gave me to share with that. So like, comment, subscribe, do the thing. Remember, God is love, Jesus the way, the truth, and the life. And I'll be back on the next video. Okay, ciao.